What's up, everybody? It's Ty the Bourbon Guy, and welcome to day 2 of the 25 Days of Whiskey. Today, we're going to feature Basil Hayden. Now, this isn't the most polarizing whiskey out there, but it's up there. I feel like a lot of people hate Basil Hayden or love to hate Basil Hayden. And for me, Basil Hayden was one of the ones that got me started on my whiskey journey. As I mentioned with Maker's Mark before, you know, it was just a point in my bourbon journey, if you want to call it that, where, you know, I'm spending more on this bottle. This at the time was in the $50 range, and I'm spending more on a whiskey than I've ever spent before. The bottle looks awesome. I mean, regardless of what you think about the whiskey, the bottle looks awesome. And I think more and more people start to, their palates start to develop a little bit more. They start to get used to certain flavors, and then they want to challenge themselves with higher proof whiskeys. So a lot of bourbon enthusiasts or whiskey enthusiasts out there love higher proof, cask strength whiskeys, all that. But something that always interests me is this is 80 proof. And so a lot of people kind of talk about the lack of flavor and the lack of depth. But you think about other whiskeys around the world, there's a lot that are bottled in that 80 to 90 range and still provide a lot of flavor. So I think you have to think about, again, I say this all the time, but you have to think about what that whiskey was intended to do, who that was intended for, what the whole idea of that whiskey is, and go from there, right? So if somebody loves this bottle and this is what's getting them started on their whiskey journey, don't bash it. Don't, just because you want a Knob Creek at 120 proof or whatever, it doesn't mean that what they enjoy is any less to them. So I think it, just like with every other bottle, when you start your journey on a certain bottle and or a few of them that you start with, you go back and you try it again, and all of a sudden maybe you have a different appreciation for it. But this was the first one that I really felt like I stepped my game up. I drank it over, you know, on the rocks or whatever. This is the first whiskey I ever drank neat. And it just, again, just like I said with Maker's Mark, this made me feel like my game was elevated. I felt like, man, I can, you know, I'm here now, right? There was a particular event that I went to in Lexington, and everybody brought, you know, different things, and I brought Basil Hayden because that's what I knew at the time. That made me feel fancy, and I mean, you would have thought I was walking in with an Old Fitz or something, but you know, I felt at that time like that was my jam, and this is what I liked. And when I brought it in there, you know, everybody was like, "Oh man, this guy actually knows bourbon because he brought Basil Hayden, not because, you know, he didn't just bring Jim Beam, he didn't just bring Jack Daniel or whatever." And that just gave me that confirmation that I needed to keep going in this journey. So whoever out there, whether you've been in the bourbon game and you just enjoy Basil Hayden, or whether you've gotten started on your journey and you're reaching for something like this, or maybe you're reaching for something like a Jefferson's or a Maker's Mark or whatever it is. If you're on this bourbon journey and you've started, 1, welcome. 2, I hope you enjoy this along with me. If you don't have this one here with you, feel free to pour up something else and just sip along and be entertained for a few more minutes. So the Maker's Mark that I did yesterday, you know, that softness, it's that proof point at 90 proof, you know, it's still very soft and very approachable. This being at 80 proof is definitely more approachable, but you're going into an oakier nose here. This is a little bit more that oak, caramel, vanilla, the quintessential type of bourbon that you might be thinking of. Let's see what it tastes like. So it's kind of a weird thing to me when people say this is a good drinking whiskey or a good sipping whiskey, because I mean, that's what I do with the whiskey as I drink it. But this would be a good drinking whiskey. This is something that, again, is approachable. It's not going to be overpowering anybody. If you're not used to that, you know, even the burn of an 80 proof whiskey, if you're not used to it and you pour this over ice, it's going to mellow this down completely. So, you know, I think this is something that a lot of people can still enjoy. If you haven't had this in a long time, go back to it. Try it again. See what you like, see what you don't like. And maybe you pick up different flavors now that your palate's a little bit more developed. Let's finish this. Cheers. So Basil Hayden, thank you for being part of my journey. You kept me going. It made me feel validated at that time to feel like I really knew what I was talking about. Years later, I still don't really know that I know what I'm talking about. I always say I'm an enthusiast, not an expert. But I appreciate you all being here. This is day 2 of the 25 days of whiskey, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 3. Cheers.